For the past week, we've been docked in the harbor of Rudesheim, exploring the gorgeous landscape and putting off what was ahead. In front of us lay one of the Rhine's most difficult sections to navigate, with swirling currents, a constant stream of commercial barges, and sandbanks and rocks placed directly in the middle of the river. We had our work cut out for us. But as we set off from the dock and entered into the swirling Rhine River, we were reminded of how much more difficult this river might have been for sailors of old. From chains draped across the river to ominous customs houses intent on collecting their toll, to suicidal sirens leading sailors to their doom, this is the story of the Rhine River Valley. I'm Maya, and this is Aladino. In mid-November, we converted our 28-foot sailboat into a riverboat, and we started going north, from the Mediterranean all the way to the North Sea. In front of us, we had 2,000 kilometers and 200 locks. Join us as we navigate river currents, discover incredible places, cruise through canals, wait out a global pandemic in the heart of France, and record the whole voyage with a new episode every Friday. This is North Through the Continent. We're going north through the continent.
And just like that, another week has passed. This will probably be the most exciting river day ever, and I put exciting like in brackets.
I have to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous about what's to come. This is going to be the most intense current of this entire section of the river. So we're going to enter, it's going to be really intense, and then it's just going to slowly get better from there. We set out from the harbor filled with a kind of nervous energy. We know pleasure craft navigate this section of river all the time, but we never had. And most of the pleasure craft were motorboats with big engines and a kind of agility that our underpowered little sailboat definitely didn't have. The day before we set off, a sailboat just like ours had to be rescued after running onto a sandbank. We had confidence in ourselves, but we also knew we had to be careful. Today would be an adventure.
Yeah, I know you've probably heard it enough by now. We're acting like this is the Five Finger Rapids in the Yukon River, which is also a pretty famous place where they trashed boats. But yeah, for us and for our entire journey, and we've done quite a bit, this is just the place where it all condenses together. But we couldn't be better prepared. Yeah, we've looked at the river, and yesterday I've done engine maintenance, I've checked everything. And also we ran it for like half an hour before leaving, so it's happy and warm, and here we go.
The anchor's ready in case
the anchor is ready, and there's ropes ready, and we have the floaties on, and I got sunscreen on, and I got sunglasses on. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Right here in front of Rudesheim, the current's actually really gentle. It's really wide and flat here, so which is good because there's also a lot of ferry traffic here. There's ferry boats that cross the river. There's actually very few bridges which cross the Rhine. Mostly it's done with ferries, and so we're just watching out for those now. Then we'll go a bit further, then we'll get into it. Bye bye, Rudesheim! Thank you for the lovely memories. Now the navigation markers here are essential to follow because not only is, it's lots of traffic, lots of current, all of that, there's also all these rocks. So hard to see even in person. I'm not even sure if the video you'll really see it, but there's a rock wall in the water just above the surface. And so if you aren't in this channel, you're in for a nasty surprise. But we are in the channel. We keep the red buoys to our starboard since we're going downriver. Also, just to make things even more comforting, the guidebook which Aladino has for the Rhine, it's all in German so I don't read it, but The guidebook he has says that the rocks that exist here and that are, big navigation hazards in the river are made out of some of the hardest rock in the world. So just in case you wanted some extra comfort, there you've got it. Ahead, the river was about to narrow into a steep gorge and the current would sweep us along to the town of Assmannshausen. Okay, here we go. So, right there, again, I'm not sure if you can see it, that's the rock breakwater that we could see from above in the vineyards. And this is where the channel starts to narrow. So I think we will see our speed start to pick up pretty soon here. Okay, we're in it. We're in it. And not bad. There's a lot of visible current, but there was a lot of current. Even with reduced RPM, we were being pushed along at 9 knots over ground. For a boat with a hull speed of 6, that's pretty racy. We found that by bringing our throttle back to the minimum required for steerage, we felt a lot more in control, otherwise that 9 knots could have been 11. But as we passed by the mouse term on our port, we felt safe and in control, which brings me, actually, to a story about a time when sailing down this river required paying attention to more than just the currents. Now the mouse term is built on this little island right in the middle of the Rhine, just as the river narrows. The mouse term translates to mouse tower, and like a lot of the castles built along the Rhine, it has a legend associated with it, which kind of has this inextricable blend of myth and fact. So the mouse term was apparently built by the Archbishop of Mainz. His name was Hatto II, and he was known to be an extremely cruel ruler. He built the mouse term as a customs tower for passing ships, demanding payment, and often at threat of shooting the crew or trying to waylay the ships if they didn't pay. Hatto was unanimously hated, both by sailors and by the people of the town, and one year, famine struck. The townspeople had nothing to eat, and so they turned to Hatto, who had entire barns stacked with grain, and they begged for him to give them some food. He refused, and it eventually got to the point where the townspeople were so angry that they threatened to revolt, and this made Hatto nervous. So he said, okay, you can go to the barn where I store all my grain, and you can eat. So overjoyed, the peasants all went into the barn, but Hatto's men locked the door behind them and set the barn on fire. The town people all burned inside the barn. And apparently, as the barn burned and the people inside screamed, Hatto remarked, "Hear those mice squeak." After that, he returned to his castle, and he was besieged by a group of angry mice. He fled in terror, and he took a rowboat across the river to the Mauseturm because he thought that the mice wouldn't be able to follow him there. But they did. They swam across the Rhine after Hatto's rowboat, and they ate him alive inside the Mauseturm. So here we have a beautiful example of a very happy German fairy tale, as you can see, as we pass by the Mauseturm. Bad news for Hatto, but good news for sailors who could now navigate the river without being robbed or shot at by a menacing dictator. As we passed the Mauseturm, we were glad that no flaming arrows landed on the boat. In fact, the journey seemed to be going well. We are moving a bit in the whirlpools, but of course we expected that, and it's not overwhelming, so it's going pretty well. There was a lot of current, there was no denying that, but we felt fine. Okay, so we are now coming up to the town of Assmannshausen. This is where they grow all the red wine. We had been told that just after the town of Assmannshausen, the worst of the current was over. There were still plenty of obstacles ahead, but at least soon would be able to navigate past them at a slightly slower pace. Gradually, the current did diminish. It still whirled around us, but with less intensity than before. Plus, it was Sunday, which meant shipping traffic was a little bit reduced. It's interesting, the wake from the big ships is so wide that Magic Carpet can bob over it easily. These guys are more the pests, the sport boats! Oh my god! Oh. Next up was Reichenstein Castle on the left bank, yet another castle that was once home to robber knights. If you remember from our last episode, there was a time in the Middle Ages when the Rhine was practically infested with robber knights, who were essentially just would-be taxmen who illegally demanded exorbitant taxes and tolls from anyone passing by, often under threat of kidnapping or theft. The robber knight business was so lucrative that many of these castles began appearing to collect tolls from anyone unlucky enough to be passing by, and the tolls were frequent. From one castle, often the next castle would already be in view. Up here is the Sunek Castle, which was apparently full of robber knights. What a phrase that evokes such imagery. I bought a little book from a tourist office all about some of the legends attached to these castles. I was expecting a book filled with whimsical stories about bygone times, but oh no, German stories do not mess around. The story about Sunek Castle is particularly gruesome, as it involves a prideful baron plucking out the eyes of his enemy and then leaving him to rot in a dungeon, only to years later bring out this poor blind prisoner so he could gloat in front of his guests at an orgy he was hosting. The baron began taunting his prisoner in front of the guests, and so the blind man, sick of being locked in a dungeon and not keen on being taunted, took a bow and arrow and shot the baron in the neck, presumably guided only by the sound of his voice. Look, I'm not making this up. Those were apparently the sort of shenanigans going on in Sunek Castle back in the old days. Okay, so we are through the worst section. That's tankmatch.com, online dating for tankers. This boat is called Gracias, so Aladino says, de nada.
I think I might be over my troubles.
Up there is the castle where we almost spent a night. Sure enough, we were coming up to the town of Bacharach, with the medieval castle converted into a youth hostel. After passing an absolutely massive vessel, which appeared to be made out of 4 barges tied together, we floated past this gorgeous town and castle, which we have explored more thoroughly in last week's episode. I still think it might be the most impressive youth hostel in the world.
When I was feeling down, you saw right through it all. Oh, I could not fake it, no matter how
By now, I was feeling truly relaxed on the river. The traffic was steady but totally manageable, the current was relatively calm, and any obstacles were very clearly marked. But then, just as another reminder that things weren't always this way, we came across the instantly recognizable Pfalzgrafenstein Castle. This castle, built on an island in the river, looks like a place that several gargoyles might commission. I can just imagine strange little gargoyle creatures living in each of those gables, leering suspiciously out at ships passing by. And in fact, that's more or less what used to happen, although the gargoyles were more like embittered toll collectors. This customs house is famous for stringing chains across the water to stop any boats from passing before handing over a fee. Fortunately, we didn't have such problems.
There is a little tricky section ahead where the river splits, and that is because in the middle there is rocks coming out. They didn't quite explode the channel properly. But they're well marked. There's buoys and I can see them already.
We passed by the rocks without a problem. But now fast approaching was another obstacle, perhaps the most famous on the entire Rhine. We were soon approaching the Lorelai Valley, famous for a very steep cliff where a lovesick woman named Lorelai threw herself off a cliff in despair and was transformed into a siren who sang to passing ships and caused them to wreck on the sharp rocks below. To me, the interesting part of the story was the part about the sharp rocks below, something that I didn't want to end up on. Oh, and there's a barge. I can see why there's the myth of sailors going aground here. There's some pretty intense whirlpools. Stuck between a big cliff and a bunch of large military vehicles on a whirly-swirly river. Not my ideal situation, but we were doing okay. Check that out. That's not from a boat, that's just current and shallow depth, and this little guy is heading straight for it. Yeah, motorboats don't have depth, but still. Up here we have the same. We've got more rocks, it looks like. Back there's the statue of Lorelai. So I guess that's where the myth comes from. You look at the Lorelai and then you end up on these rocks. We passed over a very unsettled area of water, our bow bobbing up and down. But soon we were past it and on smooth water once again. More ships, more towns, more castles. By now I have completely lost track of what was what, so how about we just relax and enjoy the scenery for a moment.
In your velvet embrace, our bodies floating through space. I picked you out across the room. There was a gravity to you.
We were now drawing closer to Koblenz, our final destination for the night, and the end of this castle corridor. But first, there was one more grand finale. This is Stolzenfels Castle, which my guidebook says resembles a jewel in the forest. It seems like an accurate description.
Just like the planets orbit the sun, so do I.
As we approached Koblenz, we were gradually shaken out of this fairy tale and back into reality by the reappearance of industry. We veered off the river into our harbor for the evening. Okay, it's a bit hidden, but here is the entrance to the harbor.
I wanna be part of your vanity, caught in your gravity now.
We have arrived!
Yes, we have.
And what's next, my love?
We have to go out and explore.
Oh, God. We're both tired.
But no, let's go. See
Yeah.
this place and then eventually continue tomorrow.
Yay.
If we see things today, and if we see there's too much to see, then we stay one more day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so we headed out to explore Koblenz. But for that, you'll have to wait for next week's episode. As always, a giant thank you to all of you for watching and commenting, liking, subscribing. I really appreciate all of that, and I read all of your comments. And an extra big thank you to our patrons for making these episodes possible. They really wouldn't be able to exist without your continued support. So thank you so much. And an extra big thank you to these folks who really go above and beyond to ensure the continuation of this entire series. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.